My people, I'm Abdul Omari, the host of these videos that are exploring transformation happening in the greater MSP region. We're going to be exploring advancing equity in our region. And if you know anything about my work, you know that I play in this space. I focus on leadership development and the inseparable ties to equity, inclusion, and diversity. But as we talk about advancing equity, we also know that our state has some of the largest inequities in the entire nation. We're going to talk to some folks about what Minnesota should be doing to make it more equitable, equal, and have better outcomes for everyone, no matter your background. To get our conversation started, we're going to talk to someone who I've known for a long time, Deshaun Drew, the president of Minnesota Public Radio. We'll be asking him to think from a leadership perspective and think about how we might galvanize folks who are in roles of influence. Deshaun, always good to be with you. Appreciate seeing you in person. So I'm curious to know, folks are tired of talk, right? Folks are ready for equity to move. And so thinking about the Black Leadership Alliance, the Vanguard, what is it? And then how can it move us from talking to actual tangible progress?
You know, our goal by creating an alliance of alliances, among Black leaders and Black organizations is just to improve coordination, communication. As we were talking on the heels of Floyd's killing, we really felt like we needed to be part of something that was broad and long-term. There are a lot of other resources already being brought to bear on the biggest issues that are facing us, and we're not getting it done. So we don't pretend to have any secret sauce other than we think working together, having better communication, having better planning and alignment, and having a long-term commitment of working together will make a difference so that we look up in 2030 and the story on the street's different.
So paint a picture for us. What might it look like? I know it's early, but what could it look like? What are some of the things that could emerge?
A lot of what we envision happening in this movement to some degree is that you get folks who are committed to these key areas. As I said, we've talked about everything from education, healthcare, and housing to workforce development. But what we're trying to do is get greater alignment among the folks who are already in those spaces, so they've got better data to work with, so they've got at times the ability to share resources and therefore make a dollar go farther. So they've got the ability at times to speak with one voice when it comes to advocacy, policy issues, right? And we want to make sure that Black voices, Black leadership are centered in this work because, a lot of well-intentioned people and organizations could end up doing stuff to us instead of with us if we're not really intentional about making sure the conversations are of a co-creative nature.
Deshaun, appreciate you being with us. Always a good time to rap with you and catch up and see what's going on. And so we look forward to seeing what happens with the Alliance in the future.
Thank you. Great to be with you as well. Appreciate the time.
The killing of George Floyd impacted a lot of people. Deshaun Drew talks about how it galvanized a group of people who want to start an alliance. Other folks, like John Naylor, the CEO of Medica, has had to take a personal journey. And so we're going to talk to John Naylor about some of the work that he's doing at Medica and how they are place-based. So John, thanks for being with us. Before we jump into your personal journey and your views on equity and things like that, tell us a little bit about Medica and how you all responded to the killing of George Floyd.
Thanks, Abdul. Our team called every member in the zip codes that were affected to make sure they were okay, to see if they need any additional resources. Our team had drives in the office. People brought supplies. But what was interesting, Abdul, as we talked to community leaders through this was great. It's nice to help us, but we need something long-term. We're running a marathon here, not a sprint. We need economic development and jobs, but they challenged us to do something more. So we actually decided to create an office in a community. And we picked this location at the Wilder Foundation in St. Paul's Midway neighborhood to actually open a Medica office and create jobs in the community, to create economic development and jobs where the people are.
Excellent, excellent. So let's shift now a little bit. How would you say that your worldview has shifted when you saw the way in which George Floyd was taken far too early?
I had always an awareness of some of the issues, but as I watched these things unfold and got more engaged with the community, it was really a call to action. So I look at my transformation as awareness to action. I want to be part of that solution.
Indeed. We look forward to seeing what happens in this space and Medica more broadly. And so we appreciate you spending some time with us and look forward to seeing what happens later.
Thanks, Abdul.
Yeah, thank you. So advancing racial equity within an organization takes tremendous amount of internal work. Now we're going to talk to someone who's known as the woke coach, Sina Hodges, an external consultant who helps organizations such as Medica think just about how they can advance racial equity in their organizations. So you're known as the woke coach, right? And I love that, right? Like, hey, the woke coach, right? And so let me ask you about what you talk about in terms of taking allies and becoming accomplices. Tell us about that.
You know, an ally is someone who's there for you. That person has done their research, they know what's happening, they're willing to engage, especially if people from marginalized communities are very clear with them about what those tasks are. But the difference between an ally and an accomplice is that an accomplice is willing to risk something. An accomplice is someone who is willing to use that power and that privilege for the betterment of someone else.
So you work with organizations across industries and different sizes. What are some of the big blind spots or kind of common mistakes that you see folks make when they're talking about equity and racial justice?
Sure. We talk about issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. One of the things that organizations haven't done is define what those terms actually mean to them, right? What do you mean when you say diversity? What do you mean when you say equity? What do you mean when you say inclusion? So one of the other things that I notice that happens in businesses and organizations is that they're really not aware of what the data says about their own industries, right? What does the data say about how racially diverse they are, how equitable they are, how inclusive those environments are? Sometimes we write these lofty statements, right? We know that injustice, inequity, and violence exist in the world that we live in. And we write these statements and we say things like Black Lives Matter, but we don't do anything about it. We don't have training programs for our employees. We don't diversify our boards. We don't diversify our staffs. And sometimes we feel like our words are enough. Words have to be met with actions, right? Unless we're doing something, we're doing absolutely nothing.
Indeed. Sis, I appreciate the knowledge that you bring, the knowledge that you just brought to us. And thank you very much for being with us.
Oh man, you're so welcome. I appreciate it.
Indeed.
Yeah.
The woke coach, Sina Hodges, just dropped some great jewels and knowledge about what's happening when she's working with organizations. Now we're going to talk to Adair Mosley, the CEO of Pillsbury United Communities, about a project called Justice Built Communities and thinking about how equity can be developed within communities, by communities, and for communities. So Adair, you run and are the CEO of Pillsbury United Communities. And in 2019, y'all shifted your strategic focus to talk about infrastructure and using the term upstream. Tell us what that means.
Yeah, upstream is the notion that we need to be thinking about the systems and infrastructure and policies that really have downstream impacts on our communities. And so while we're seeing alarming, largely racial disparities in our communities, is because most of our efforts have been centered on reactive solutions. And so this is really about moving this work upstream.
So Adair, tell us about Justice Built Communities. What is it? What are the goals? What are we trying to do?
Yeah. Justice Built Communities is a community development corporation and a community quarterback. Its goal is to be able to equitably build our communities with the infrastructure and systems to be able to usher in small business development and entrepreneurship in Black communities. It is this entity that will serve as a conduit to economic revitalization in Black and Brown communities.
So based on what you just said, what does that look like? How does that show up?
Yeah, it shows up in two strategies. One is a kind of buy and hold, opportunistically looking for land and buildings for us to be able to buy and hold and to bridge that ownership to Black and Brown entrepreneurs. The other one is putting a community-centered design process against economic development. So asking our community, what do you want to see in your community? Aligning the partners, working with our financial institutions to be able to braid those resources together, and then managing that implementation. That if we start something, we finish it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So with that, thank you for joining us. I mean, I love that we are having this conversation right here in the community that we're talking about, because too often we have these conversations somewhere else in another room and then go and say, all right, y'all, here's what needs to be done. In this case, it's grounded and it's rooted in the community in North Minneapolis. And thanks for leading the charge.
Yeah, thank you for providing the platform to lift this work up.
For sure. There's nothing like being on the job and being able to talk with one of your friends. So I just had a great time talking with Adair Mosley from Pillsbury. We're gonna stay focused on wealth and wealth development. We're gonna talk to Danielle Steer, Managing Director of Lunar Startups. Lunar Startups is focused on helping underestimated individuals who are looking to become entrepreneurs, particularly Black, Indigenous, people of color, female, LGBTQIA+, and or non-binary individuals. So Danielle, thanks for being with us. We're excited to talk to you, excited to talk about Lunar Startups. And in many ways, Lunar Startups is helping untapped talent, untapped entrepreneurs, folks that have been underestimated and underinvested in. So what are the greatest opportunities that you see when we can or when we do invest in those demographics?
At Lunar Startups, we believe that entrepreneurship, and specifically inclusive entrepreneurship, is the most important pathway to build wealth, to increase opportunity, to create new jobs for more people, and the data really supports that. The governor's office did a study about 10 years ago that demonstrated that BIPOC entrepreneurs hire more BIPOC employees. Women entrepreneurs hire more women employees. And so there's this reinvestment that happens within the community. If we can elevate and amplify great solutions coming out of BIPOC communities, great solutions coming from women entrepreneurs, we're going to see that trickle-down effect in a real way that's actually measurable and creates wealth, creates new high-quality jobs.
So you talked about inclusive entrepreneurship, right? And I'm in the world of leadership development and equity, inclusion, and diversity. Inclusivity means different things to different people. What do you mean when you say inclusive entrepreneurship?
So we're in the accelerator space. And the reason that we actually started was because we were seeing that accelerators across the board were increasing the finance gap for gender. We were seeing that there was really negligible rates of people of color and women participating in accelerators at large. That matters. Startups that go through an accelerator are 23% more likely to survive 5 years out of exiting. We need to be better supporting the early stage startups. We need to be building a bridge between economic development agencies and the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And that's really where we think by investing in more inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem solutions, we can see much more significant wealth building happen within our own communities without necessarily the dependency on philanthropy, without necessarily the dependency on our very generous community that we have here. We can build that through capitalism.
Indeed. Danielle, thank you for being with us. We appreciate the opportunity to talk. You know, as we think about emerging from the pandemic, emerging from an economic downturn, entrepreneurship is going to drive the economy. And I'm thoroughly excited to see Black and brown folks, women at the forefront of that as we continue to move into the future. So we look forward to what y'all have planned and what y'all are going to do. And thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
We're about to shift now and talk to Audra Robinson, who created the brand Rocky Robinson through the accelerator with Lunar Startups, and see what that brand is doing to elevate and highlight the wonderfulness and the beauty of Black women and girls. So Audra, to begin the conversation, I think about my nieces, my beautiful Black nieces. I think about my sisters, and I'm curious for you to tell us, why is it important to see Black women, Black girls in the brands that they're using and the brands that they see?
I don't want to sound cliche, but representation really does matter. When you see yourself there, you feel valued, you feel seen, you feel heard, and you feel understood.
Yes, it may sound cliche, but that representation is real. I really appreciate that you're talking about that. What is the best opportunity or some of the best tangible things that we can do to invest in entrepreneurs, whether they're BIPOC, they're women, traditionally underestimated or underinvested in?
I think the best, based on my experience being on this side of entrepreneurship, after coming out of corporate America for over 15 years, is resources. You need to have resources. It needs to be intentional. There needs to be accountability attached to it. And frankly, when it comes to communities of color, there needs to be a concerted effort and outreach. We need to show people where the resources are and show them where the money resides. It really is the way to close the economic gap here in America.
So let's think into the future now. So let's imagine a time where the Minneapolis-Saint Paul region is beginning more and more to unlock and unleash the talent of Black entrepreneurs, of Indigenous entrepreneurs, people of color. Tell us what that would look like in your mind.
I mean, that sounds beautiful and it sounds amazing. And the reality is it's just going to take people to make that happen. So to me, it's about collaboration and closing those gaps that we all have to admit are there, from housing to education to job opportunities. When we all sit at the table together to find those solutions, I think it could be a beautiful thing.
Indeed.
And I think Minnesota is very capable of that.
I'll end where I started, from an uncle, from a brother, black and brown nieces, black and brown sisters. I say thank you. I appreciate you for what you're doing.
That means a lot.
And how you're changing the dynamic of the way that folks view themselves and see themselves.
Thank you. That makes me feel proud, so thank you.
If you're feeling like there might be a lot of work to do around advancing racial equity, you're right. I encourage you to learn from others. I encourage you to be active listeners. I encourage you to have uncomfortable conversations. So once again, I say thank you for traveling on this journey with us, because when you make an investment in equity, you make an investment in my nieces and nephews. And that's the most important thing for me along this journey. Be equitable and take care.